Welcome to our Q3 Sanctions update brought to you through the strategic collaboration between FinCrime Agent and the Network for Financial Crime Prevention, NFCP. I'm your host, Louie Vargas, the founder of NFCP. And before I introduce our expert presenter today, I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what we'll be discussing today. So, as we reach the midpoint of Q3 2025, the sanctions landscape continues to evolve at an unprecedented pace, with recent developments including ongoing Russia-Ukraine sanctions packages, shifts in U.S. policy, and enhanced EU enforcement mechanisms. Staying ahead of compliance requirements has never been more critical for financial institutions and businesses operating globally. And as mentioned, we're privileged to be joined again by Denitsa Rebaine. We will call her our expert presenter and friend to not only myself, but to the community. And she brings an extensive experience in compliance, sanctions management, and she offers practical insights that bridges the gap between regulatory requirements and real-world implementation challenges. And what we'll hopefully go through today and what you'll gain today in this session is we're going to go through an enforcement actions update. So we'll do a bit of a roundtable on some key enforcement actions that we've seen recently from the UK, US, Luxembourg, and France. We'll try to provide as best as we can practical implementation guidance, actionable strategies for enhancing your sanctions compliance framework, risk management insights. So by this, we mean best practices for identifying and mitigating sanctions-related exposure. And then we'll wrap things up by looking forward and sharing our perspectives on that front with anticipated trends, regulatory changes to prepare for in Q4 and beyond. And whether you're a compliance professional, risk manager, business leader, this session will equip you with the knowledge and tools needed to navigate today's complex sanctions environment effectively. We encourage active participation via our LinkedIn channels, as this is a recorded session. So please, if you have any questions, concerns, please reach out to us directly, whether myself, NFCP, Marco, FinCrime, even Denitsa will be happy to address any of those offline. And before I let Denitsa introduce herself to us again, I just wanted to point out that during this discussion, we will express our own views and opinions. It's not reflective or on behalf of our employers in any capacity. So all this we're sharing with you today is for informational purposes only, not legal advice. So if you do have a question that's specific to your institution, please escalate that internally. All right, with that said, Denitsa, can you please reintroduce yourself to our community?
Of course, thank you for having me again. Pleasure to be here with the FinCrime Agent and NFCP. My name is Denitsa Rebaine. I'm an anti-financial crime compliance expert. I began my FinCrime journey in 2015, so this is around 10 years now. I've been working in sanctions for the last 5 or so years as well. And as you mentioned, sanctions keeps being a hot topic. So for Q3, I thought it would be really interesting to take a look back for what happened in the enforcement action space for this year. As a reminder, all of these enforcement actions that we will talk about are publicly available. So anyone who has interest can access them and read through as well. Back to you, Louie. I'm excited to be here today.
Thanks, Denitsa. And let's just go right ahead and dive into some of these critical enforcement actions that you've mentioned, which is shaping the landscape we see today. So let's start with OFAC. And in the US, OFAC is usually pretty active in the enforcement space. We've seen a little bit less so of that with the current administration taking things over, revamping, as it were, the federal government agencies, which OFAC is a part of. So there's been a slowdown, I would say, from normal US activities, especially around the Russian front. If you could just give us your insights into this OFAC enforcement action, which involves a Russian oligarch.
Of course. So there was a venture capital firm called GVI Capital that was fined around $216 million. That's a pretty hefty fine. And they were fined because they're actually acting quite egregiously in their. So, as a venture capital firm, they were servicing one of the Russian oligarchs, as you mentioned, Suleiman Kerimov, and following his designation, they just continued working with his cousin or somebody related. I don't know if that was necessarily a failure of their internal controls or just a behavior the house has encouraged, but it's a good reminder that even though you're not a financial institution, you're still in scope and you still should follow and be compliant with sanctions. Should be better due diligence when it comes to related persons, change of ownership, you in trusts in various companies, and you have to be very cautious in your dealings. Second of the non-compliance with subpoenas that OFAC mentioned is another, I guess, aggravating factor in that case because the firm was probably not responding in time. This means that they are likely hiding or discovered something incriminating, right? One of the good practices for not only OFAC but all regulatory agencies, when you receive questions, to provide a response in a timely manner and as transparent as respond all of their questions. This usually helps in reducing the fine, even if you have done something wrong. So yeah, I think there's a key takeaway and a really interesting case considering the large fine that they got.
Yeah, for that. And I think you made a few key points here is one that even if you're not a financial institution, you need to comply with sanctions and compliance. And hopefully that people up because for some time, some of these companies kind of under the radar, but it proves that OFAC is looking also at non-financial institutions. I think it also raises another question, right? Because most institutions, maybe more so financial institutions, have a PEP, right? So do our oligarchs consider PEPs? That's a good question. I don't think they are, but they might have their own category, but they should be treated similarly, right? Because if they, we've seen also with the invasion of Ukraine, but also before that, the invasion of Crimea, all the entities that were involved in those activities divesting under the 50% mark in order to evade sanctions. So this is, the Russian playbook. Should be stuff that we need to keep in mind that when oligarchs are moving around ownership, other companies that are sanctioned or moving around ownership, we should still internal policy to a certain threshold to those risk scope so that we at least make a decision and a clear documented decision why we've decided to do business with them or why we still continue to do business with them. Because if you just turn the blind eye, it's not bliss. You can't just say you didn't know. Any thoughts on that, Denitsa?
Yeah, a really interesting thought. Actually haven't thought that oligarchs are not PEPs. I guess it really depends on their position and what they do, because I would certainly have thought that they would be treated with the same high risk measures, enhanced due diligence measures as a PEP. Rather, that's an interesting thought. And if you have not updated the policies or procedures on how you are handling type of that are now with higher sanctions exposure, then maybe it's time to revisit the KYC CDD policies and procedures. I think this is a valid point, and of a more general financial crime nature than sanctions, because sanctions often is black and white. Is he designated, yes or no? Is the company 50% or more owned? But with evasion, we saw that shift, that there is the need to really have a deeper due diligence in some of the transactions or dealings or customers that you're onboarding.
Exactly. Well, so let's see how this plays out. See if the companies are now smarter for it or if they continue this activity. Now moving to the next example that you have regarding OSFI and the UK, also involving Russia, funny enough. Over to you.
Yeah, of course. There was a law firm in the UK, which was fined by OFSI. This is the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation, the UK regulator, similar to OFAC, fined them £465,000 for breaches of the sanctions regime. The law firm used to have a Moscow representation, at the office there, and the invasion of Ukraine, they began the process of divesting. Any malice or intent, they were last minute operational stress, trying to pay out some payroll, maybe some vendor closeouts, and they actually made 6 payments to Russian designated banks. Case, and although not egregious, unlike the previous one, it does show that it requires review the parties that will be involved and ensuring that you are not providing funds to sanction. And of course, as any type of frauds or comes under high pressure, right? Criminals, one of the tactics utilized to advantages to put certain pressures. I think here, not defrauded by the bank, or the Russian banks did not do anything intentionally. The firm acting in the sense of urgency and maybe quickly overriding protocols that they may have in order to act in urgency has breached, unfortunately, sanctions and was penalized for that. So I think having these good controls and not breaching them, even in a sense of urgency, is really important for compliance.
No, definitely. Thank you for mentioning that. And like you said, it's not egregious. They were peers. They were trying to do the right thing and divest from their business within Russia. But you still have to do the things the right way. Licenses when required, and not just kind of things through in a panic. So it looks like that might have been the situation. But yeah, I think also the kind of controls and points you mentioned is very well taken. And now
before we move out to the EU, just to spread about the UK. This year, I think it was really interesting on enforcement action because all of the year's actions are actually against various types of entities and businesses. For example, we have the legal services that we mentioned, but there were also companies, fiduciary services companies, non-for-profits, and banking. So, of course, banking cannot be missed, but I think it's quite interesting to see, and similar to OFAC enforcements, when you look at the industries of the cases of enforcement action, you can see various designations, including logistics as well, broker dealers, and manufacturing and services businesses. So I think this is really interesting and demonstrates more the importance sanctions compliance in other sectors, especially the gatekeepers like law firms, capital firms, and etc.
Yeah, great point. An instance of the U.S. Controls has become even a bigger tool for the U.S. to use. And we're seeing now a merger of sanctions compliance and trade compliance in that regard. I think also FinCEN out of the U.S. has been focusing on certain sectors. I think that's why you're also seeing a lot of that highlighted the U.S. generally, but also within sanctions actions as well. Within the UK, it has been pretty interesting just because similar to the EU, they've kind of holding back with really targeting companies with enforcement actions. I think last year we've seen a uptick where they're testing the waters. And from what I hear from people I know in the UK, it's because the local authorities want to be sure they win those cases and not kind of position where the courts don't agree with them and then they lose the case. So I think we'll see more of that in the UK, and especially in different industries where they know they really have them and they'll win those cases. We'll see how that kind of continues and how these enforcements mature UK. As you alluded to, we're going to move into the EU now. The EU as a bloc it doesn't really enforce on their own from the council perspective, but each member state has their own mechanisms to do that. So you have two examples today, one from Luxembourg and one from France. So yeah, you could walk us through those.
Of course. So, the French example is of a really French regional bank because I haven't seen the name elsewhere, but Banque de Lubac. They were fined by the French regulator 600,000 euros. It was because their screening system was not picking up for sanction screening transactions below 1,000 euros. Now, as a reminder, for sanctions purposes, unlike AML or other maybe fields, there is no minimal value. Even a cent or notion of economic resources where really not even tangible transactions. So for sanctions, there is no minimum value. There is no below this line. It's zero or something. Should be screened in the transactional space. Everything is usually screened real time, and are no thresholds for that. It could be a cent. It has to be screened if it's going to a sanctioned party. So that I think was an easy example if you have experience, but somehow omitted by other regional players that may not be subjected to the working with OFAC, let's say, as a more traditional financial institution, and I guess had a weaker sanctions program in terms of the EU measures.
Yeah, great point. You said it's easily avoidable. Just said maybe they're a small regional bank and they were trying to kind of something on a risk-based approach. But yeah, you said rightly so. With sanctions, there is no minimum amount, right? So if it's any transaction, any money movement or even messages can be subjected for sanction screening. So hopefully that's a valuable lesson they learned and they've implemented something to cover them in the future. And if you could also walk us through the one out of Luxembourg.
Yeah. We see in the French case the values that everything should be screened, everything should be real time. Now, in the next case, which is Alipay Europe, which was fined by Luxembourg 214,000 euros, there the difference is that you don't only have to screen, but you have to be really quick in making the determination of what happened with those alerts. To add to that case, a bonus case, very recently OFSI has published their case against Vanqui's Bank. Maybe I'm not pronouncing that right. Never mind. Was not fined financially, but was only in the industry. Now, let's see what's the commonality between the Luxembourg case and the UK bank case. In the Luxembourg case, they had that were not resolved in time. They were experienced certain backlog because other matters generated a bigger volumes, and they were not able to apply without delay against. In the Luxembourg case, there was nobody really sanctioned. They didn't miss anything. That's my understanding, at least from what was provided in the action. But authorities are outlining, if you're taking too much time in deciding, you are exposing yourself to violation in case that's a true match. And the UK case demonstrates that. It took them 8 days for the alert. What's interesting there is that it's a terrorist financing designation, and because of its importance, OFSI has notified them that going to designate someone on their customer, and that will happen tomorrow. So they did have an advance there, but I guess when the alert came in, probably with many others, because daily the filters generate so many customer alerts, it was not effectively prioritized, and were not able to restrict the account without delay. Again, coming back to that term, which is not poetic at all, but it's really hard to also practically alerts and right. And main reason being the majority of false positives that the systems produce. So took them around 8 days And that time, the designated person was able to withdraw £200 at an ATM and pay something for £8 99. They choose not to find the bank. I think this is also a reminder of last year's case of Wise, I guess, for people who were following this. Yeah, real-time reviews appear to be more and more in scope for European regulators, like widen focus that must do something with your alerts and especially transactions when it comes to sanctions. It's difficult, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you for walking us through that. And also it was great to have that comparison between the two and how we can be better at to an SLA and not just having these stale alerts and then potential activity continuing to happen on radar. So I think, conversation today, we've provided some key takeaways from each example, and we're quickly running out of time here. So again, I want to thank everyone for watching. Really want to thank Denitsa for her insights into these enforcement actions and providing great suggestions to improve your sanctions program. Before I leave you, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us via LinkedIn. If you're not following FinCrime Agent or NFCP, what are you waiting for? No time to waste. Do it now. We're here for you. We're here for the community. So it doesn't hurt to join us and follow us. Missing out on great content, and it's all created for you guys. So if you have any suggestions, reach out. And yeah, leave it at that. So until next time, be well. Thanks again and see you soon. Take care.
Thank you for having me again. Bye.